There are true crime cases that shock you with their violence. There are cases that shock you with their mystery. And then there are cases that shock you with something far more unsettling than either of those things, with the sheer, breathtaking audacity of what a human being is capable of doing, while looking the world directly in the eye and smiling. The case of Kouri Richins belongs in that final, rare, deeply disturbing category. It is a story set not in a dark alley or an abandoned warehouse, but in a beautiful home in the mountains of Utah, in the kind of community where neighbors wave to each other across manicured lawns and children ride bikes on quiet streets, and nobody ever expects anything terrible to happen. It is a story about a marriage, a secret affair, a mountain of debt, a Moscow Mule cocktail, and a fatal dose of fentanyl. And it is a story about what happened after, about a woman who allegedly killed her husband of 9 years, watched him die in their bedroom, called 911 with a voice that prosecutors described as not the sound of a wife becoming a widow, but the sound of a wife becoming a black widow. And then, while the investigation into his death was still ongoing, sat down and wrote a children's book about grief. Eric Eugene Richins was 39 years old when he died on March 4, 2022, at the couple's home just outside Park City, Utah. He ran a successful stonemasonry business. He was a father of 3 young sons, ages 9, 7, and 5 at the time of his death. By all accounts, he was a man who built things with his hands and loved his family with his whole heart. The night he died, Kouri Richins told police the couple had been celebrating the closing of a real estate sale, that she had made him a Moscow Mule cocktail before they went to bed, and that she had woken to find him unresponsive. The story seemed straightforward enough at first glance: a tragic, unexpected death, a grieving widow, 3 little boys who had lost their father. The community mourned, the family gathered, and Kouri Richins began the business of widowhood. But the autopsy told a very different story. Eric Richins had no prior history of illicit drug use or prescription drug abuse, and yet the level of fentanyl found in his blood was approximately 5 times the lethal dosage, ingested orally. 5 times. Not a recreational amount, not an accidental overdose from a man with a secret habit. 5 times the amount required to kill a human being, delivered in a drink by the one person in the world he trusted most. Prosecutors alleged that Richins hid 5 times the legal amount of the synthetic opioid fentanyl in the Moscow Mule cocktail given to Eric, and that she had tried to poison him a month earlier on Valentine's Day by giving him a sandwich from a local restaurant laced with fentanyl. Eric Richins had called 2 friends that Valentine's Day and told them he felt like he was going to die after eating the sandwich his wife gave him. He recovered. He did not report it to police. Within weeks, he was dead. A BC News +2. The investigation that followed peeled back the layers of Kouri Richins' life and revealed something far darker than a grieving widow trying to hold her family together. Prosecutors alleged Kouri Richins hoped to profit from millions in insurance money after her husband's death, to erase debt from her struggling real estate venture, having owed lenders more than $1.8 million US, and set up a new life with boyfriend Robert Josh Grossman, with whom she had a long-running romantic relationship. Eric Richins' life was insured for more than $2.2 million at the time of his death through several policies, including one Kouri allegedly applied for by fraudulent means, using an incorrect Social Security number for her husband. Text messages recovered from her phone showed Richins telling Grossman she wanted to leave her husband and marry him one day. A forensic accountant testified that her net worth was negative $1.6 million the day after her husband's death. She was not a successful real estate investor quietly building a better future. She was a woman drowning in debt, in love with another man, and prosecutors argued, completely unwilling to walk away from the financial prize that her husband's life insurance represented. CNN. Searches on her phone told a story of guilty knowledge that her defense team could never adequately explain, including queries for, what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? Can FBI find deleted messages? Women's prisons in Utah, and most disturbingly, luxury prisons for the wealthy in the United States. She was not Googling how to grieve. She was not searching for therapists for her children. She was researching the forensics of fentanyl poisoning and the comparative comforts of federal penitentiaries. A house cleaner named Carmen Lober testified that she had sold illicit fentanyl pills to Kouri Richins several times in early 2022 Baumgart, in the weeks leading up to Eric's death. Hundreds of messages between Richins and Lauber from that period had been deleted from both their phones, but the records of those messages still existed. The deletion itself, prosecutors argued, was evidence of consciousness of guilt. News Nation. And then there was the book. While the investigation into her husband's death was still ongoing, while detectives were still pulling phone records and interviewing witnesses and testing the fentanyl in Eric Richins' bloodstream for its source, Kouri Richins published a children's picture book titled Are You With Me? And published in March 2023. The book claimed to bring peace and comfort to children who had lost a loved one, dedicated to her 3 sons to help them cope with the loss of their father. She promoted it on local television and radio stations. She gave interviews about grief and healing and the importance of helping children understand death. The audacity of the act was so complete, so breathtaking, so utterly disconnected from the reality of what prosecutors believed she had done, that it became the detail that made this case famous far beyond the borders of Utah. A woman who allegedly poisoned her husband with 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl, writing a grief book for children about losing a parent. The cruelty of the irony was almost impossible to process. The trial began in February 2026 in Park City and lasted 3 weeks, featuring 13 days of testimony from more than 40 prosecution witnesses. The defense rested without calling a single witness of their own, and Kouri Richins declined to testify. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning a unanimous guilty verdict on all counts on March 16, 2026, convicting Kouri Richins of first-degree aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder for the Valentine's Day poisoning attempt, insurance fraud, and forgery. CNN, AB, C News. The sentencing on May 13, 2026, which fell with heartbreaking symbolism on what would have been Eric Richins' 44th birthday, was one of the most emotionally devastating courtroom scenes of the entire year. Eric's sister, Katie Richins Benson, stood before the judge and said, "Today is Eric's birthday. I stand before you because he can't." Letters from the 3 sons were read in court. All 3 said they would feel unsafe if their mother was ever released from prison. The middle son, now 11, wrote, "You took away my dad for no reason other than greed, and you only cared about yourself and your stupid boyfriends." Kouri Richins addressed her sons directly for nearly 40 minutes, telling them repeatedly to be like your dad and insisting she had not committed the crime for which she had just been unanimously convicted. Judge Richard Mrazek looked at her and delivered his sentence with the clarity of a man who had heard enough. A person convicted of those things is simply too dangerous to ever be free. Kouri Richins was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. CBC News +2. Eric Richins built things with his hands. He built walls and paths and structures that would stand long after he was gone. He built a family, 3 sons, who now write letters to judges asking that the woman who killed their father never be free. And somewhere in a Utah prison, the woman who allegedly poisoned his Moscow Mule published a book about his death and smiled into television cameras while investigators closed in, will spend the rest of her life in a cell, with nothing left of the plan that cost a good man everything. Justice in this case was not poetic, it was simply necessary.